Hey, y'all. I'm so grateful to introduce you to today's guest, SC Perot. We were connected through a dear mutual friend earlier this year at a dinner party, and she was asking me, "Oh, you're a writer. You have another book coming out." I said, "Yeah." And she said, "My first book coming out next year." And I said, "Well, what's it about?" And she said, "Well, it's called Styles of Joy." And I said, "Get you on the show right now." I'm not going to give her whole story away, but the entire premise of her book is her walking us through the hardest, darkest season of her life and how that very much, as we talk about all the time on here, inspired her to deep dive into what it takes to really live with true joy in your life. She is as wise as she is witty. It is hilarious and deep and thought provoking and just filled with joy. And so I just want you guys to dive right in, cue this up. Don't miss it. Her book comes out in February. So we are very blessed to be one of the first interviews she's done. I know you're going to love it and want to pre-order it immediately. So don't miss today's episode with SC Perot, Styles of Joy, a feel-good framework for rediscovering joy with a twist. Hey, y'all. I'm Maddie, author, speaker, and certified sommelier. I think we can all agree that life can get pretty tough at times. So I'm going on a journey to uncover how some of my favorite people are chasing joy in their lives. And I'm bringing you along with me. Through their personal stories and funny encounters, I'm chatting with authors and entrepreneurs, musicians and brands to learn how they're hanging on to the good in life, even as trouble comes. Because as life gets hard, joy is a choice we can make together. I'm Maddie, and this is the Enjoy Life podcast. Okay, SC, we've just been jabbering a tad because we are friends in real life through our dear friend Madison, and so we were just going to go ahead and hit record. And I can't wait for people to meet you. I can't wait for them to hear your story, know about your book, because we're in Music City, and you're not from Music City, but you live here now, and you went to college here. Music brings me joy. I know from your book that music brings you joy. And so how I like to start the show is to ask the guest, if you had a walkout song for your life right now, what would it be? I have an inkling. I know whose song it will be, and the guest will know why soon. But what would be your walkout song right now?
No question, the song that started this whole adventure, the song that changed everything for me, the song that dried my tears, those however many years ago, it still works. And that song is Music for a Sushi Restaurant by Harry Styles.
I could have guessed that. I feel like I would have nailed that question.
Absolutely.
And we want to know why. So your new book is called Styles of Joy, and it releases in February. So
Yes.
everyone can go ahead and pre-order it now. It's had a great, very successful pre-order. Will you tell us sort of the backstory and what are the two facets of that title that mean so much to you?
Yes. So the backstory is in 2022, I found myself flat on my face. I mean, I was in the thick of grief because of a grueling divorce. I had stopped practicing law. I'm a former lawyer. And there was that pandemic. And all of a sudden, I looked around and every piece of my life had been upended. And I was processing everything I was going through by going on long walks. I was living in Austin, Texas at the time, going on long walks around the Town Lake, Ladybird Lake Trail. I was in truly the throes of grief. And I remember typing good energy in on Spotify.
Yeah, we were grasping.
And I found a playlist called Good Energy. And I was like, oh, how about that? Great.
Yeah, couldn't hurt.
Yes, it worked. And Harry Styles' third album, Harry's House, came out 2 days after I told my former partner that I wanted a divorce. And I had never listened to Harry Styles. I was not a One Direction girly. Those were kind of college days for me. So I felt like I was a little too old for the 1D days.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I heard Music for a Sushi Restaurant. And I'm like, okay. Okay, good energy. Yes. And then I was like, Harry Styles, huh? I knew Watermelon Sugar. Everyone knows
Yeah.
that. So then I am listening to that whole new album, and Music for a Sushi Restaurant, my theme song, my anthem, was track 1 to that album. So I would start walking it was about 3.5 mile trail, and I would hit that album on repeat. And I just remember saying to my mom at one point, as I said, The thing about this is it's working. I'm moving my body. It's working. I'm moving my body. It's time in nature. It's
Yeah.
vitamin D and endorphins and happy music. And it was
Yeah.
this recipe that really did get me through. And there were days I was hitting that trail more than once. I mean,
Yeah.
I was walking it off, you know?
Yeah.
I fast forward became a super fan of Harry Styles, and I saw his show 17 times in 5 countries
In how much time?
in 10 months.
In 10 months. Get out of
I
here. 1.7 shows a month.
That's yes, yes. Whatever that math shakes out to be, yes, exactly. And I traveled with people I met along the way. I met all of a sudden, as I write in the book, as the fog of my grief lifted, I found myself in this sparkly world of feather boas and sequins, and I
Yeah.
was like, "This former corporate lawyer loves it here.
Yeah.
I love this," you know?
Yeah.
Forget the blazer life. I'm thriving in my boa, you know? And I think it's important to mention I've never taken an interest in pop culture. That's what is fun about this story,
Yeah.
I think, is, you know, I care about 2 things when it comes to pop culture: Harry Styles, obviously, easy number 1, and Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah. Did you have Dancing with the Stars before, and then it was replaced by Harry Styles? Or did you find that along the way as
They
well?
have the same vibe.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
That happy, sparkly, wholesome
Yeah.
energy, I'm like, "More of it. I want more."
Yeah.
And, you know, I know you and I share the same Christian faith. And I just remember saying to my mom, I was like, there's a difference between things that are grounding me versus keeping me afloat.
Mm.
And the things that were grounding me, exercise, therapy, journaling,
Mhm.
you know, talking with friends and family, my Christian faith, what keeping me afloat, my Christian faith. But also at the end of the day, after I'd done all this hard work, you know, I just needed some good energy.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Music at a sushi restaurant.
Music for a sushi restaurant, it just brought it, you know? Sometimes it was
Yeah.
those solo kitchen dance parties. That's all that was left at the end of the day, you know? So,
I am so glad that you touched on that right away. That was one of my big bold topics that I wanted to hear you talk about was keeping me grounded versus keeping me afloat. I think that is such a wise distinction. And I think that I mean, I'll speak for me specifically. I think that there was a point for me where I don't know, there was something and maybe it was a cultural voice or like an internal critic voice or something where it was like the silly afloat things, it felt like those weren't worthy of my energy or something,
mhm.
and that it was just and maybe that's the nature of death, I don't know, I mean, that I was betraying him in some way, we're really jumping into deep water. But then what I came to was, no, it's like what you discovered. It's like these things are the gifts for the gruel and the grind that grief is, and it's not that they're, unimportant or silly.
Mm.
It's that you got to have levity somewhere, and that those things are just as profound, even spiritually, as church, as prayer, as therapy, because you've got to pour back in. You've got to be buoyed by something when all these other things feel like the weight of the world is on you. And so for you to just go head first into that music and the culture and the lifestyle that comes with the whole Harry Styles fandom is, I think, equally as brave as it is, funny and silly and unexpected. Like, that's a lot.
You know, it really this whole experience made me critically think about joy for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, where is it? I joke in the book that I was like Barbara Walters at these concerts. You know, I'm like surrounded by these joy-filled people. And I'm like, what, but I also saw them online. All of a sudden I was watching fangirls on TikTok and I was watching them on Instagram and they go to Trader Joe's and they see sunflowers and they're like, "Ah, sunflowers remind me of Harry Styles because he has a song called Sunflower." And I'm like, "Well, that's fun."
Yeah.
Like, "Hang on. I wanna play. I wanna
Yeah.
play too." And it was imbuing these ordinary objects with the ability to
Mm.
bring them joy and not apologizing for it.
Yeah.
I think as I was critically thinking about joy for the first time, I was also watching post-pandemic people reclaim communal and collective joy.
Mhm.
And what you were saying about sometimes joy is written off as superficial, I was watching women in 5 countries emerge from this dark global chapter and be able to be carefree and dance and sing together safely, and it made me realize, I've never really been into sports, but now I'm like, "Let's go sports,
Yeah.
yes, yes, the sports." Like, shout out to the sports because they bring people so much joy.
Yeah,
It's music and it's entertainment and it's Dancing with the Stars, you
and
know?
it's Dancing with the Stars and feather boas. That's so awesome. When you started this Barbara Walters investigation of joy,
Mhm.
did you consider yourself a joyful person before? And when you started to take note of these joyful people around you, besides that they love Harry Styles, did you see common threads just in how they lived or spoke to you, or what was sort of the underlying commonality you found?
Well, that's a great question. Have I that kinda I hear 2 parts there. Was I always a joyful person? I went to a summer camp growing up in North Carolina called Camp Greystone. Positive outlooks on your day and declaring you're gonna have a great day,
Yep.
that was really part of that culture, and that made such a distinct impact on me that I would say I was never some dark pessimist. I've always been an optimist, but this felt different.
Mhm.
This felt being this inquisitive and this observant, it's because so much was stripped away out of my life and it got really quiet. And I
Mm.
think in the quiet, when I was really reflective, I became very observant
Mm.
because what used to work for me was no longer working. And all of a sudden, what was working was new. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, you guys have been here already. What's going on?
Yeah.
And what I noticed that was a running theme in this kind of fan culture specifically, the emphasis on kindness. I mean, that's the
Mm.
bread and butter of this
Mhm.
whole orbit. And I needed that kind of not to sound not to sound overly dramatic, but it really did restore my faith in humanity because as I
Mm.
was watching these acts of kindness at this concert, and I kind of joke that Harry Styles' Love on Tour walked so Taylor's Eras Tour could run. Because if you look at the timeline post-pandemic,
Yeah.
I mean, they overlapped a bit, and there are similarities in kind of this collective effervescence. But, for example, I was talking to this single dad who had his young daughter at one of the shows in London, and he opened up to me and, he said, well, actually, this is part of the story that I wanna mention. She needed to use the restroom, and we were in the general admission pit where people are marking their territory, you wanna stay in one place for the whole
Yeah.
show. And he expressed to 3 girls next to him, he goes, "Yeah, I kinda don't really know what to do because, like, if we leave, then would you all hold our spots?" And these 3 girls go, "She's at a Harry Styles concert. She's safe. She can just we'll
Oh.
take her." And so these 3 girls, mid-20s, took this
Oh.
11-year-old girl up through 90,000 person Wembley Stadium. She came back with a Coke in her hand, and
Yeah.
she was wide-eyed, and while she was gone with those sweet women, the dad turned to me and he's holding, this fan culture that you bring flowers and balloons and it's just this whole thing, but he's holding all the little, things for his daughter and holding her balloon for her before it's time to release it at the right time at the show. And he looks at me and he said, "My divorce from my wife has been so hard on our family. And the one thing my daughter and I connect on is Harry Styles." And he goes, "And I surprised her this morning with this ticket." He
Oh,
goes, "Can I show you her reaction video?"
I have chills.
And I said, "Oh, please show it to me." I mean, it was so sweet. And one of my other favorite stories is this girl I met in line said, "Oh, you're from Austin. Austin's why I love Harry Styles." And I said, "Oh, did you go to his concerts there? I kinda didn't know." And she said, "No, actually, a few years ago, I got in a really serious accident when I was visiting a friend in Austin, and I had to move home and get facial reconstruction surgeries with my parents." And she was like, "It was the darkest time of my life." And I remember my mom saying, "Siri, play Harry Styles."
Mm.
And she goes, "And I had never listened to his music, but it was so joyful and light." She
Mm.
goes, "I associate Harry Styles with healing, and that's
Ugh.
why I wanted to buy a stranger a ticket for tonight's show." And to the biggest show of his career, she bought an extra ticket to just joy bomb someone.
Ugh.
She goes, "Because it's just my way of giving something back to this light and
Yeah.
free world that gave me so much joy when I needed it."
That's unreal, and I will attest, those stories are littered throughout this entire book, and, like, you just close each chapter with the, like, full body chills, and I don't think it's too dramatic to say restoring your faith in humanity. That really is a picture we see through your eyes how that was coming back to life for you in a way that we just don't see enough in the world we live in. You have 4 kinda tenets, in this paradigm that you give us for seeking joy and living joyfully, and I wanna hear what they are from you, and then I kinda wanna dive into one that speaks to this idea of what you have kinda coined, seeking joy in the wild, which is so fun. But what are the 4 kinda tenets?
So, as I was watching and really reflecting on communal and collective joy post-pandemic and the value of that, I started thinking, well, what does collective joy look like outside of the walls of any arena or stadium? So I introduced this concept in the introduction called the macro joy. Like it's just like the sum of all of our joy. And this phrase, yours, mine, and ours, is repeated throughout the book because I love
Mhm.
this idea where first we have to tend to our own joy, but the question became, how do we maximize the macro joy? So the answer is when we live joyfully in all caps, CAPS. Those are the 4 primary tenets of the book. So part 1 of the CAPS framework is when we cultivate joy in our own lives. So big, hard-hitting question, what brings you joy?
Yeah.
What brings you joy? And
Yeah.
I lecture about this at Vanderbilt. I teach this system to my students. They really were guinea pigs when I was writing the book. They didn't know that. And I was like, that concept didn't land very well. Never mind. Never mind.
Yeah.
Erase it from
Scrap.
the board,
Yep.
scrap it from the book.
Yep.
And so this question, because what I hear people say so often is, I don't even know what I like anymore.
Mm, mhm.
I don't even know what I love. And that for me, after doing this work, I'm like, oh, someone ask me, please ask
Yeah,
me.
I
That
can
brings
tell
me
you, I
joy.
can tell you.
I got a 6-page list. I pay attention differently. And the theme of that first section of Cultivate is the opposite of joyful is not joyless, it's jaded.
Mhm.
And my prime example is you notice when your coffee order is wrong. Do you really notice when it's right?
Mm, mhm.
How closely are you paying attention? Part 2 is adopt. So now we're moving on from C to A of CAPS, is adopt. And the theme in this section is the opposite of joyful is not joyless, it's jealous.
Mm, yep.
Because in my season of loss, I was looking around and I so easily could have been jealous that this, wasn't happening to anyone else. But instead, I actively rewired how I was consuming other people's joy and
Mhm.
perceived victories. And we'll touch on that in a second because I know you want to follow up there. The third section is protect because the opposite of joyful is not joyless, it's judgmental.
Mm,
And I find that we're judgmental not just of others' joy, but our own. There's so much shame. People say
mhm.
things like, I know it's really weird, but I really like K pop. Who cares?
Great.
Great. I'll go to a show. Tell me all
Yeah.
about it. Why do you love K pop? I know it's
Yeah.
really weird, but I love to crochet. Sick. What's the
Make
problem?
me a sweater.
Make
Yeah.
me teach me how. The one rule in this book is if it's not harming you or anyone else, let's go, baby.
Yeah, I love that. I
You
love
say
that spirit.
Renaissance fair, I say pass me a turkey leg. Let's
Yeah.
rock. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And the fourth part of the book is on spreading joy, and it's just a love letter to the individual, right?
Yeah.
Like we all wake up with this boundless capacity to spread joy every day. It's just a reminder that it's a very sugary sweet part of the book.
Mm,
Um, as you know, and the book is dedicated. The dedication, actually, I haven't revealed this, and it's to the tiny angels everywhere. And
mm,
that's the phrase I use for whenever someone shows you a random act of kindness. And, it feels like it really transcends the norm, and it feels like a tiny miracle. And so
Yeah.
there's a chapter devoted to that. So that's the fourfold framework is cultivate, adopt, protect, and spread.
I love it. Let's hit on them a little bit too, because I have things I want to hear from you on. In each of them, and I think in Cultivate, it was so striking to hear you say, and then when I first read it, just like so many people don't know what they love. They don't know what brings them joy. And you have actually some really lovely kind of prompt questions at the beginning of that section that I think will be very helpful to people to help them start paying attention. You've said pay attention like 10 times already. And you even write in the book that if you could sum the book up in 2 words, it's pay attention. And I feel that on such a deep level because I think for me, and I know for you and for many, that whatever season of grief for whatever reason, there is kind of this twofold road where you can either kind of completely numb out and zone out, or you can acknowledge that it's an invitation to pay even closer attention. Like you can shut the world out or you can open your eyes so you see it that much more clearly, if that makes sense. And I think it is sort of a daily choice to do so. And when you do, that's when I discovered all the little things that bring me joy. And I know that you feel the same. And so I'm grateful that you have those prompts for people who just don't even really know where to start. And then where you start is really just paying attention. But I also want you to talk about another way that I think we forget that we can cultivate joy, and that's the joy of dreaming. It's not that this is a gigantic section of the book, but I think it's powerful because I think in the course of our maturing, for good reason, the idea of dreaming gets replaced with the idea of goal setting, and those aren't necessarily the same. And I want you to speak to that for people.
I'm so glad you brought this up because it's not a huge part of the book, but this is one of the workshops that I lead my students in because they're all seniors and it's all about goals.
Hmm.
I'm like, yes, we love that. We love goal setting. However, I was so inspired. I met this man in New York and his name is Robert. I met him through a random booking when he picked me up at the airport, but then I kept in touch with him because I enjoyed his company so much. And he just was the best conversationalist. And he was just like a life enthusiast. And we just
Mm.
vibed. Like we were friends immediately. And all he wants to talk about is his wife and his 4 girls. Like he
Mm.
loves his
I love
family. And
that.
it's just so beautiful and contagious. And he told me that one of his daughters wants to be a Broadway actress before she's a Supreme Court justice.
Okay, love
And I was
her.
sitting there in the back seat of his car watching, the city go by, and I asked myself, "When did I stop dreaming?"
Oh, yeah.
And so I wrote this list in my phone. I was on a flight, and it's called Just Some Things. Just not even they're not goals, they're small, medium, and large because it's about yes, some accomplishments are on it, but also how I want my life to look and feel.
Mhm.
And it's like, you know what? I do wanna find a four-leaf clover.
Yeah, yeah.
That's important to me. It is. And I do want to one day build a house from the ground up. And I have this vision of I really want an outdoor dining table, like, under a trellis,
Beautiful.
I don't know, but I plan on living a long life.
Yeah,
When I think about that 65 item list, there are days where I'm like, "Let's get going. I'm
yeah.
busy." I have to write a country song, I have to write a kid's book, I have a lot to do, you know?
Yeah,
And it woke me back up in this really incredible way, and it's not about whether I ever go to Bora Bora.
yeah, right.
I like daydreaming about staying in a little hut over the water,
Yeah.
and it's so energizing to think
Mhm.
about the joy of dreaming those big dreams, and to give a bit of a spoiler, before I wrote that list before I was writing this book. And I wanna mention the top item and the bottom item on my list of 65.
Please.
I was already writing this book when I found that list in my phone, and I was jaw dropped because even though I wrote them in no particular order, line item number 1 is write a book. And I found
Wow.
it, and I was like, I don't even think I could have told you that that was on my heart, but
Uh-huh.
clearly it was.
Yeah.
And I do a dramatic reveal with my students. I start bottom up and I hide the top line item. And I said, I know this was in no particular order, but something on my heart made this number one. And I
Yeah.
scroll down and they see write a book and they're like, no way,
Get
it's
it.
it. The message is, I mean, people talk about manifesting, whatever, or whatever it is. But I do think there's value in what if you let your mind totally wander?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I will give a little bit of a spoiler that the last item on the list is go to Robert's daughter's opening night on Broadway and her swearing in at the Supreme Court.
We are waiting on that.
I'm locked in.
I have a feeling Robert has you on the invite list for both occasions.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
he sure does.
I reached out to him to send him the chapter, and he was like, "Oh, my daughters are gonna freak out," you know?
Oh, that's so sweet. I'm so grateful to talk about that because I think it very much parallels with a conversation I have with people a lot in grief, especially young widows that I work with, and talking about hope and that the action of hoping will do just as much for you as any other spiritual, emotional work that you put in, because it's not that hope is this enigmatic thing to chase down and find and then you have to white knuckle it so you don't lose it. It's that the actual ongoing verb of hoping
Mm,
brings you joy, and it changes your perspective, and it is a medicine in and of itself. And so the whole idea of dreaming, knowing good and well a lot of these things probably aren't going to become something that really is a reality. It's like the idea of dreaming neurologically fires off chemicals that I don't know what they're called that bring you joy. No matter what the ending is. It's the typical trite, like it's the journey, not the destination. So on
right.
the journey, dream. On the journey, hope for something better than where you are, because in doing so, it brightens the day you're in right now. Like just do it.
Absolutely, and this list has changed my life.
Yeah.
It has changed my life because when I'm walking the McCabe Trail here in Nashville, I love walking McCabe, there are clovers everywhere. You better believe I'm not asleep when I'm
You're
walking
gonna find one.
I'm on that four-leaf clover hunt because I
Yes.
know that's important to me because I cared enough to write it down,
Yeah.
and it re-engages. I know that's so tiny, but it makes me feel really engaged with my surroundings in a fun
Mhm.
way, and, for example, my best friend Whitney and I talked for years about how one of our dreams was to have tea together in New York at Bergdorf Goodman. For years, we've talked about this. That's not an outrageous dream.
No,
I
certainly
mean,
not.
no, she travels. I like to travel. And it finally happened this summer. And what I can promise you is it was 10 times better because we were
Because
like,
you had
this
talked about.
is the thing.
Yes, 100%.
Yes, we're checking it off this dream list. It's
Yeah,
so rewarding and so fun. We went to all kinds of other restaurants, but that was the best part because
yeah,
we talked about it and planted that
yeah.
seed. We made it happen and we were like, yes,
There was anticipation and almost like a sacredness to it.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's awesome. Well, the next part is adopt, which I referred to you seeking joy in the wild, and you kinda talk about it, like watching, the Harry Styles girls see sunflowers at Trader Joe's.
Mhm.
But you make a note that, noticing someone else's joy is different from adopting someone else's joy.
Right.
How do we not stop noticing, because you always wanna notice, but how do we go from noticing to really adopting?
So, excellent distinction because the first kickoff chapter is Joy in the Wild, where it's like I love looking for animals in the wild, like a deer in the woods. I'm like, "Oh, incredible. I love it. And
I
so,
loved that about you, by the way. That was one of the, like, I know it's weird, but
yeah,
things that you filled in, and I was like, "That gives an extra shade to her that I'm really glad I know about," just as a sidebar.
I have this creek in my backyard. While we were in this interview, I mean, it's only a few yards from me. I saw a frog jump while we were on this call, and it took every ounce, every ounce of willpower to not be like, "Oh my god, a frog." Like, just
Disconnect, interview over.
gotta go. I gotta go. I'm so busy right now. But in my season of loss, all of a sudden I realized that watching others' joy was bringing me so much joy.
Hmm.
Where I was like, those girls that are tying feather boas together to jump rope with strangers before a concert starts, that's so beautiful. Or like grown adults doing the wave at a stadium, it's
Yeah.
so unserious. I am
Yeah.
obsessed with it.
So
Like, it's
unserious.
so unserious. A conga line? Are you kidding? Like,
Yeah.
joy in the wild. Look, there it is.
Yeah.
There it is. That is pretty simple
Mhm.
because those are strangers, and you're like, "Oh, cool, people having fun." I love when people are having fun. I want people to have fun because 'cause I'm having fun.
Yeah.
The vibes are right. It's a little more challenging. It's much more challenging when you think about adopting the joy of someone closer to you in your life. And
Mhm.
paradoxically, you'd think it'd be the opposite. We feel a little more detached from strangers and we feel more invested with the ones that are in our orbit. And in order to introduce this distinction, I write about this memory that I have from college where the opening line of this chapter is, "What does ancient East Asian gardening have to do with a robust joy practice?" Thank you so much. Great question. I'd love to tell you.
Yeah.
Because in this class that I took, I remember not a ton of it because it was really challenging. And it was my last art history class I had to take to graduate. But I remember this concept about borrowed views, where if you're designing a garden, let's say your neighbor has a beautiful tree, you don't want to block that tree because all of a sudden that view is part of your garden. It's this really beautiful idea of, yeah, that's not my tree. That's on the other side of the fence, but
Mhm.
I get to enjoy it. And that concept came to me at a really specific moment in my grief walk. It was the first Christmas
Mm.
post separation, and I love Christmas cards. I love holiday cards. And as I was putting these up, I mean, Maddie, I was so depleted. I'm
Mm.
like, I'm so sick of checking this mailbox by myself every day. I in this temporary housing I was living in, which it was objectively fine, but I call it the divorce landing pad because
So
I
funny.
knew I wasn't going to stay there for a while. I was not invested in this place. I did not want it to be home. It never felt like home.
Yeah.
And so I was putting up all these holiday cards around the divorce landing pad. And I remember thinking back to that art history class, thinking, you know what? These are other people's gardens. And I don't have much growing in mine right now. You
You
know,
little bear.
it's looking a little bare. And because I had dug up my career, so that plant bed was looking pretty empty.
Mhm.
And I always say anyone who thinks divorce is about two people is sorely mistaken. I lost
Mm.
a whole family. I lost a whole group of friends. I lost my dog. I lost my house. I mean, I was in this season of like, what is going on? And so my garden was looking a little depressing. And I write in the book that I didn't even know what seeds I wanted to plant next
Mhm.
because I couldn't move forward if I didn't know where I wanted to go. And I looked at those cards and I thought to myself, I feel really lucky I get to borrow these views.
Mm.
This
Mhm.
is the abundance growing outside of my garden walls. But thank goodness there's not more shriveling up and killing their plants because
Yeah.
mine, I
Then
don't
I'd
want,
have nothing to look at.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And, but I just thought, I'm so lucky that I have these views.
Mm.
I'm so lucky there's not more pain and hurt
Mm.
because this sense of thinking about the macro joy, it benefits all of us when there is more
Mhm.
goodness and more joy. Now, is this a foolproof method? No, absolutely not. But have I ever regretted remembering this as an option? No,
Yeah.
because it's really important to remember just how little has to do with you.
Mm. Wow. Yeah.
That guy at that altar, okay, not my guy. That has nothing to do with me.
Mm.
And those smiling, happy couples, when I was in the depths of processing a divorce, that has nothing to do with me. That those job promotions, those, graduate
Mhm.
program graduations, whatever, the new house they got, the vacation they got to go on, has literally nothing to do with me, except I get to borrow those views if I adopt this
Mhm.
mindset. And it's not always easy.
Yeah,
I mean, I
not
don't
at
know
all.
anyone who doesn't get a case of the why me's.
Mhm.
I had a case of the why me's yesterday. I was I, yesterday. Yesterday was the pits.
Yeah, yeah,
It just was.
yeah.
I screamed for joy that my friend who's had a brutal infertility journey is pregnant with a baby girl,
Mm,
and I screamed into my pillow because I was pissed off about still grieving years later going into family holidays.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not sure, so our friend Madison came over because I was not in a good mood. And our queen brought me a scarf
I love it, you're wearing it now.
and homemade scones and a devotional and a handwritten note, and she sat with me in my backyard, and I said to her, I said, "You know, I'm sick of being the joy girl today."
Oh my god, that's so great.
You know what? I tried to take
Yeah,
my own advice today.
yeah, yeah.
I tried to believe that tiny joys stack up if you let them. Uh, you know, it's you
Oh,
know,
that's so
there
funny.
and I said, "I love a turkey sandwich. It's one of my joys." And
Yeah,
today, I got a turkey sandwich at 10:30 in the morning, and guess
yeah,
what, Madison? It didn't work.
yeah, it didn't work. Oh my gosh, that is
But I
so
think it's
funny.
important, and if anyone brought up the doctrine of borrowed views from East Asian, landscape garden design, from this chapter, I would have been like, "Not today."
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah, yeah.
But
So
here's the
funny.
point of bringing that up. There's a time and place for joy.
Yeah,
And I think you understand more than anyone that our pain informs our relationship with joy.
absolutely, yeah.
This book is about informed joy. This is not all feather boas and sequins.
Mhm,
And yesterday, I felt that so deeply.
mhm.
But today, guess what? Those tiny joys, they were stacking up.
Aw, I
Because I
love
did
it.
take myself to Trader Joe's because I know that having flowers in my house, it really does bring me joy. Because
Yeah.
it makes me think of my mom, because my mom has likes fresh
Mm,
flowers because it brings her joy, and it just makes my house feel like a home. And you know what? Today it kind of did work.
yeah. Yeah, I'm so grateful for your humor, but your honesty in that because there is an element of these conversations that you and I can have now that I know there's people listening and reading that they're like, that isn't possible. Like that's not realistic. Like this is sticking your head in the sand and slapping a pretty, title on it. And there's a quote that I wrote down that you say that I realize this can be hard. Like, I realize some days I don't wanna be the joy girl, like, joy girl out of office, and that it can feel like bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. Like,
Mhm.
that's how helpless it can feel, and I appreciated you acknowledging that, and I wanna hear you tell people, like, joy is not being blind to those things.
Mm,
Joy is not pretending that yesterday your day was turned around by that turkey sandwich. It's not that. It's not blindness and a delusion of reality, but that it's a fight like worth fighting because you can when you've had your moments and you've met with your Madisons
mhm.
and you've screamed in your pillow, you can choose to pay attention again. You can choose to adopt somebody else's joy again. And I think that's such a big part of my message here and such a huge kind of invitation from you is like take agency in it when you can, you
Right.
know?
Well, this really, I think, is so critical to the message because that's why this whole conversation about like how your relationship with pain and joy are so intertwined. That's why when I see someone singing happy birthday in a restaurant, I'm like, let's go. Here's some goodness right here.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
it doesn't always feel easy to find. And so that's why when it hits, you're like, maybe it's that iced tea with lemon that just hits just right. And you're like, yes, bank it. Bank it.
Bank it.
Bank it. We take wins in all forms. And I
Yeah.
was laughing. You said it's not, slapping a label or I can't I started laughing, so I missed what you said. It reminded me of something Madison and I were we were laughing so hard. We had, like, tears streaming down our face yesterday sitting in my backyard. Tears of all kinds, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, I had this quirky doctor growing up, and one day we were having a conversation about caffeine. And I said, "I don't know, Dr. J, sometimes it just doesn't feel like it really works." And he goes, in his thick accent, he was like, "I mean, sometimes caffeine's just like slapping a dead horse." And I was like, "What?" As in,
Yeah.
like, completely futile. Like, if
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah.
tired, coffee's not gonna do it.
Yeah.
Madison, I said, "Madison, today, I feel like I was just slapping a dead horse." And she goes, "Hi ho, Silver does not wanna go." And we we were laughing so hard, and I'm like, "Yeah, Silver
Uh,
doesn't wanna go today."
yeah. That's so
You know?
funny.
And so, but again, that's why if you get those joy jolts and if you get this gift of feeling like you're back in touch with your joy, that's why we have to cultivate it in our lives and adopt others, protect it, and spread it. Like, because when you have it, it's so sacred,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. And it's work, it's practice, it requires a commitment, and it's
Yeah.
a friend of mine has this company called the Giving Keys. There are inspiring little messages on these key necklaces, and she gave me one that says, "Choose joy,"
Mm.
because I do feel so often it is a choice, and
Mhm.
I know that because that's my lived experience,
Hmm.
you know? And yesterday, maybe that 10:30 AM turkey sandwich really wasn't moving the needle and it was slapping the dead horse, but you know what? I tried.
Yeah, you tried,
I
and you chose
and
it again today.
I chose it again today, and I spent all night last night building a really aggressively large kitchen dance party playlist,
I'm here for it.
and I'm gonna put it on shuffle and see what that algorithm gives me for a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit of energy, 'cause it's worth trying.
Yeah. You mentioned again the kind of protect element of this, and would love to sort of land there with it because I think, I recall in the book you saying you, like, tested this content on your students and that you had them write definitions of joy, and there's many of them in there, and I feel like one of the kind of elements of every single one almost was just the fleetingness of it, that it's temporary, that it's in the present. Not that there isn't joy in past memories or joy in anticipation, but like the joy jolt is now. And so that's why your sum it up is pay attention. But I think once we learn to cultivate and adopt and live with these joyful eyes open, there is an element of protecting it that's really important. And so a couple things I just want to hear from you on is, if this is kind of tough, but I think if we adopt these principles, if we start to live with eyes more wide and joyfully open, like if there are people we love in our circle that we don't anticipate, not being in our circle moving forward, and they're kind of joy robbers, like how do we handle that? You know what I'm saying?
That's a toughie, and it's interesting because I really struggled writing that section because there's so much nuance with that concept
Mhm.
of if you're protecting your joy and you know someone is a joy robber, what does that look like? And it is so case by case that I decided to not include, because as I was trying to write that, I was like, oh, but I can't know other people's lived experience with
Sure.
complicated relationships, etc. But I do think one of the best examples is, what if your joy is a loud dance party and you have a neighbor whose joy is their quiet bedtime routine?
Right, right, right.
That's the easiest example I could come up with when I
Uh-huh.
was writing this, and I didn't put it in the book. But the question became to me, well, what do you do?
Mhm.
What if someone, it's almost like crossfire, like
Right.
incompatible joy.
Incompatible joy.
There's a puzzle piece disconnect. And what it came down to is a question of where's the solution for compromise? Is it
Mhm.
the equivalent of headphones? Are there small tweaks that you can make? But really, and I think I really don't want to give a long answer of what I almost included in the book, but there's this concept that I remember from law school where it's like who actually has the easier path to avoid the harm.
Mhm. That makes sense.
So is it earplugs for the neighbor and headphone? Is it what does that look like in micro decisions and steps for
Mhm.
the kind of conflicting joy? And I have a wonderful friend, Britt Barron, who wrote a book called Do You Still Talk to Grandma? It's about how do you love people through tricky relationships. And so I'm going to plug her book as an answer.
Yeah, perfect.
Maybe mine doesn't get us there. My answer is not perfect because it is hard. And I think that's
Yeah,
why there's not a seamless answer, is it is
yeah.
so case by case. But again, what I think it comes down to is who has the simpler path to avoid the pain.
Mhm. Yeah.
One of my good friends texted me who read the book this week, and she said, I just want you to know I have hated when my mom plays Les Mis in our kitchen my whole life. She goes, I do not like Les Mis. I do not like Broadway. I do not share in that joy. And she said, but when she was blaring it today, I thought about, that's bringing her so much joy. And she's having a really hard week. And she goes, thank you for that reframe
Mm.
that I can actually protect her joy and recognize
Yeah,
it and name it and say, yeah,
yeah,
that's her joy. Maybe I can step off a little.
yeah,
And she was like, I've never thought about it like that until today.
yeah,
And so that feels really exciting that as people engage with this material, they perceive their joy differently, others' joy differently. And
yeah.
that's a beautiful daydream for me.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful example, and I think is just covered in grace. Like that's kind of where I wanted to land with you anyway. Is one of the concepts you give us near the end of the book, kind of in the protect section, is a grace ladder and how that helps protect our joy. Can you tell us what that is and why that matters in our relationships? I think this is where that comes in a big way.
Right. So this is another concept that I sort of adapted from law school. And if you would have told me that in my life I would be emailing this very reputable legal scholar about my book about Harry Styles, I would have been like, what are you talking about? I was like, dear professor,
Yeah.
this might catch you off guard a bit. That your criminal law class has somehow found its way into my book about joy and Harry. Alas, here we are, and I am equally surprised. And he said, as he was talking through that every crime in our system has two components, and it's the act itself and the mindset
Mhm.
with which you do it. For our lawyers out there, obviously, I'm talking about actus reus and mens rea. And he said, and all you need to understand comes down to lamps and roller skates. Kind of like,
Yeah.
okay. And he said, if you strap on a pair of roller skates and you skate around your friend's house and a lamp breaks and you just didn't even realize there was a possibility of that, that's negligence. You
Mhm.
should have appreciated the risk, but you didn't. If you strap on your roller skates and you think, I might break a lamp, but oh well, I'm doing it anyway. And the lamp breaks, that's recklessness. You appreciated the risk and you disregarded it. If you skate knowing you're going to break the lamp, that's knowledge. And if you skate to intentionally break the lamp, that's intent. So these four concepts I've never needed in my legal career. Really, I didn't practice criminal law, but I think about this in my daily life all the time
Mhm.
because it makes me ask myself, I know the act has happened. My
Mhm.
lamp is broken.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. My heart is broken. My lamp is broken. Pieces are all over the floor. And the question about grace is that's a fact. But what else do I know for certain? Did someone intentionally do that? Knowingly do that? Recklessly do that? Or negligently do that? And as I filter that in my mind, it is a way for me to protect my own joy.
Mm.
Because in plain language, you could say it's giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Mhm.
And okay, but that sounds like it's for them. But it's for me.
Yeah.
If I don't know, for example, and I say this with my students a lot, they said, well, this professor gave an extra assignment, even though they know I have another midterm or whatever. And I'm like, how do you know they know that? Do you know that? Because
Mhm.
I don't think you do. And they said, well, they have access to something. I'm like, but okay, no, that we don't actually know that. So once you take a step back, you know, don't fight fake monsters is what I
Mhm.
say in the book. And I'll be vulnerable and I'll share this anecdote that really where I started thinking about this concept is when there was a period of silence in the legal back and forth in my divorce, and I jumped to the top of the ladder. And I
Yeah.
said, they are playing mind game. They are doing this to purposely, get under our skin and whatever, whatever, whatever. Well, turns out his lawyer was just out of town.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Mhm.
I was not grounding myself in facts.
Mhm.
The truth was, I was in a lot of pain. I knew my lamp was broken, right?
Yeah.
But I all of a sudden, his lawyer was like, "Oops, sorry, was out of vacation, out of town," and I had this realization of like, yeah, I was really spinning my wheels.
Yeah.
I was really spinning my wheels, and I was robbing my own joy by assuming the worst.
Mhm.
And I was rocking the boat when the seas were already choppy, Maddie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I did not, and but again, no one did anything wrong.
Yeah.
No one did anything wrong. I was just wound up, and that's one of my favorite things to talk to my students about is how can you ground yourself in facts to protect your own joy?
Yeah, that's really, really good, and it kind of harkens back to me of the idea that, like, forgiveness is more for you than it is the other person, and,
Mm,
like, that benefit of the doubt is more to preserve your own joy, your own energy,
right.
than it almost even is about the other person. I think that's really wise advice to carry into any relationship, in any conflict. So, well, I cannot tell people enough how enjoyable this is to read. I told you when I texted you yesterday, I was so excited to talk. I finished the book. It is deep and funny and rich and profound and silly and everything that you want it to be. Like hits on every human emotion, and your passion for other people being invited into this way of life is so clear. So I hope everyone orders the book. Right now it's on pre-order because it's coming out February 25th.
25th,
25th.
225, 225,
Um
which
it
as
is
you
the perfect early Christmas order. You can print out the picture from Amazon, put it in a sparkly box with stickers or a feather boa, and tell people you're going to receive this on February 25th.
exactly. And I think it's important to mention Harry Styles and I share a birthday.
That's so wild.
That birthday is
Cannot believe that.
February 1st, so it is coming out in our birthday month. So
Ugh.
easy to remember, 22525.
Is there a chance you can scrounge up some sort of office address of his to send it to? Maybe like a
Way ahead of you
disgruntled ex-employee?
guys.
Okay, thank God he's getting one. We hope.
I I'm thinking through how a fun way to really just say thank you to that whole team. I mean,
Yeah.
they work super hard. It takes a village to do something like that big tour, and so shout out to the whole team.
Shout out to the Harry team. I am so grateful this was number 1 on your dream list, and I'm so grateful that it's a reality. It's such a beautiful work, and I just am so glad to know you, and the way we always end, which is very appropriate for you in this conversation, is to know one thing that is just simply bringing you joy right now, besides the frog in your window.
I have gotten into bird watching because I
Let's
just moved into
go.
this house and my desk faces out onto my backyard, and I'm talking woodpeckers. I've got some, like, periwinkle little bird like, yellow tiny babies. I bought a Birds of Tennessee book. I'm leaning
Oh, get after it.
all the way in. I requested a bird feeder for Christmas, so
That's outstanding.
it's bringing me so much joy.
Watch out for the squirrels. My husband had the same idea. I think on his dream list was to build a birdhouse that was the exact replica of our house that we moved into in March. It's not done. He's a big dreamer. It's still on
Mhm,
the list.
mhm.
But we did put out bird feeders, and it was definitely something that the squirrels took advantage of and ravaged. So the poor birds are still kind of hungry. We're having to figure out how to navigate the squirrels, but
I see. I
yeah,
see.
beware of the squirrels.
Absolutely. I mean, they are alive and well in this backyard.
Yeah,
There's no
good.
shortage of
I'm
those.
so glad. SC Perot, you are such a gift to the world. Thank you for this work. Thank you for sharing your heart and this vulnerable time in your life and just sharing your joy. I'm so grateful to have you. Y'all go order the book. Do it now.
Thank you, Maddie. This was awesome. I'm so grateful.
A huge thanks to you for listening. If you liked what you heard, if you felt encouraged or found a little joy in today's conversation, please go like or subscribe to the show so you can get regular updates of all new episodes, and head over to maddiejackson.net to see both of my books and my latest online course, Through the Valley of Grief, a 6-week guide toward restored faith and renewed hope.